Welcome to another episode of the Teachers in Business podcast. I am so super excited to introduce the wonderful and magical Dr. Carrie Graham, who is the founder of Coglis LLC, which is a consulting practice that helps business owners and directors really work on improving learning outcomes for adult learners and putting best practices in place for adult learners. Think courses, think published materials, think anything you're using to teach adults something. She is an author and researcher. She's been in this learning and curriculum and leadership development space for more than 25 years in the healthcare, higher education, and management spaces. And she's been at all the conferences and done all the things, and she's amazing. She is one of those amazing people because she knows not only what you say, but here's what you don't say, and has the ability to ask the questions that help you uncover exactly what's happening and come to solutions. She is very much like me, not a one size fits all kind of girl, and knows that she can meet people where they are in what they're doing in their businesses to help them really teach the thing they do best better. And that's an amazing thing. So welcome to my favorite person, Dr. Carrie Graham.
Thank you, Sarah. Oh my goodness, what a delight to hear all of that. I have to say, oh my goodness, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with you and your audience, and I just can't wait to have a conversation with you. I saw one of your LinkedIn posts this morning, and I was like, oh goody, I'm talking to Sarah today. She always asks great questions. What a great day.
Yay. I love it too. It's super, you and I get to talk periodically. We've done it on LinkedIn. We're going to do it again here. We'll just keep doing it because I think we found that we thoroughly enjoy this. So this is going to be one of those podcasts. In theory, I try to keep them to 40 minutes, but it could be 4 days.
It could be, and that's okay.
Yeah. Right. So let's start here. Talk to me about, teacher and your definition of teacher. What does it really mean to you for someone to be a teacher? What is a teacher to you?
Yeah. So, as soon as you asked that question, Sarah, I thought about my first experience teaching, and it was as a college professor. So formal teaching, because I've always been teaching in healthcare, but my patients, I should say. But when I think of a teacher, it's sort of what I was doing at the beginning, which was I have knowledge and I have information, and I'm going to share that information with, my audience, whoever those learners are. And while that perception of a teacher has its place, what I have grown to know, and it has been more effective than just the position of presenting information to be consumed however, but really when you balance between teacher and facilitator, right? And so as a facilitator, which I really believe that I am, my focus really is on listening to what people, like you were saying, listening to what people are saying, what they're not saying, or even what they're struggling to say, and then either ask them a really strategic and critical question that helps them move the needle in their learning. Yeah. And I have found that taking that approach is far more meaningful for the learner than to simply take the position of, I'm a teacher, I have information, and I'm going to give it to you.
Well, it's that difference between teaching and telling, right?
Yes.
That, and I think it's really important, this idea of there are things when someone is learning, whether they're acting as a learner, taking a course, or they're working with you, they're working with me, there are always going to be things that people struggle to articulate, that they can't quite figure out how to form into a whole idea. And what you get to do and what I get to do as a coach, a consultant, a teacher, as all those things, a facilitator, is help them gather up those pieces into a coherent whole. Because sometimes when you say things back to people, they're like,
right.
that is what I meant. Like, how did you take my crazy, like, thought puddle, as I think of it, like this, I poured out all this stuff into a puddle, and you went like, here's the stream through it. Here's the through line. And that's a really important skill, I think, that gets brought to the work you do, the work I do, that matters out here in the world.
It does. And one of the, so I am like my bachelor's is in healthcare. So my foundation is in science, medicine, as a healthcare provider. Yours teaching, right? Like education. And so I think when people are entering into this space of coach, consultant, like you said, any of those names, but they don't come from a teacher ed background, oftentimes I find that they're, what they're going back to is the model of a teacher, like the perception of what a teacher is, which is, I have information and here I'm going to serve it up on a platter for you. When, people who have been educated in teacher education really understand, the way to help support and scaffold learning. And for people like myself who have taught in higher education for over 2 decades, and have a PhD in adult learning, and have incorporated all of that in healthcare, yes, we also understand the importance of being able to quickly, but also clearly pull that puddle that you were mentioning together. But, my heart goes out to those individuals who are entrepreneurs, business owners, or directors, and they're trying to create these learning experiences for their clients, their employees, and they don't have the same foundation that you and I have. And so as a result, I think what oftentimes they find is that their learning experience, or the information that they're putting together, it's falling flat, right? So people are not engaged. And I firmly believe when they're not engaged, they're not going to retain. If you can't retain information, you can't apply it.
Exactly.
Right. And so that's really one of the drivers as to why I do this work, is because on both sides, as a creator of a learning experience, there are things that you need to know to do it well. And then as someone who's been the recipient of a poorly constructed learning experience, it is awful. I'd rather clean a public toilet. Like, it is just horrible.
Well, and it's one of those things where I think all the time about how, like, the perception of what people see in teaching often goes to their worst experience.
Yes.
Right. To the version of it we see in the movies where, like, wah, 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 wah. and it's like, well, but that's how I learned. And I'll say to people, and I have, like, did you actually learn? Like, what did you learn in that? And is that the way you wish for the people you're trying to communicate with to learn?
Right.
Like,
Right.
if you sat down and took this course and it was totally new to you, would you hear wah, wah, wah? Or would you be engaged with it? And that's a whole different thing. I'm working with a friend now on something she's building in this space. And what she has is great. She has all these wonderful stories, but they're buried like 2/3 of the way through. And I keep saying to her, like, stories to the front, friend, just like stories to the front, because you need to pull people in, and the stories are great, but they are not going to make the first 2/3 of the way through without the story.
Right.
There's no context. It's just like numbers and math and accounting. And, and 7 minutes in, people are like, no, like, I have to go. And that's the thing. And it's like, no, lead with the story. It's like, oh, but that's the good part. Like, yeah, that's the good part. Right. They'll stay for the rest if you can bring them on board. And it's really such an interesting way to sit in other people's lives, right? To be able to see those things and be like, yeah, this is great. the stories you have is great. The content is great. It's all in the wrong order, friends.
Right, right. And I would liken that to a sundae, right? Like, yes, you've got the toppings and the ice cream and such, but and I've been seeing so much language around the use of stories, right, on social media and the spaces that you and I are in. You've got to use a story, you've got to use a story. But I would take it a step further and to say, really, to put that beautiful cherry on top is that the story really should not be about you, but rather about your adult learner. And that's what, now, yes, I even use stories about my own experience, but matched with that is something that I know about my adult audience, and it's incorporated into that story. And
Yeah.
so that's again, that's the other part of it is, yes, we do need to take the story from the end and bring it up to the front. And now that it's in the front, how are we structuring that story so that it engages, but also sets up the entire learning experience?
Well, and I think you're now this the idea of a sundae is perfect, because I think in so many cases it's like you made this beautiful sundae and it looks beautiful and you put the cup upside down on the table. And it was like, how does one get the spoon in here to get my sundae? I can't even access it unless
Yep.
the cup is right side up, right? You're
Yep.
just like, it's like there's this place in Philly that makes, I have a problem with sundaes. I like them a lot. They make the most wonderful, like old school butterscotch sundaes, which
Yeah.
like I could like swim in. Honestly, my body would hate me, but I would be so excited. And they bring out the butterscotch sauce and the whole thing. But it's like that guy made my sundae and then flipped the cup over, and it's just
Right.
those glass cups, and the big
Yeah.
spoon, and it's like, well, crap. Now what?
Right, right. Like, and then you think about it. And so that experience, after a while, it becomes frustrating. And after, some more time of being frustrated, you just say, you know what, screw it. I'll go have something else.
Yeah.
And learning is in fact the same. It really is the exact same. If people cannot get in and get to the parts that they like, they're going to get frustrated. And then the more frustrated they are, they're just going to say, you know what, this isn't for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And that's the interesting thing about something like that is, that's so much of education. And I come from math ed, and I was just, had this little mini meltdown about algebra and equity this morning on Facebook, because algebra is a gateway to so much. But like kids come into algebra and people are like, well, but they could just work harder. I'm like, well, but underneath that frustration they have with algebra is they got lost in third grade.
Yeah.
And so there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years between them, and now they have to pass this to get to the next stage. This is the gatekeeper. But like, you've been telling them for 8 years to work harder and figure it out. So
Right.
And somehow now it's going to be like, oh, right. Like, that's not how any of this works. It's not how learning works. It's not how people work. It's not how anything works. Most humans would be like, screw this. And they are. So talk to me. We've talked a little bit about it, but tell me what you started teaching people, when you started teaching, and what you're teaching now. We know a little bit, but give us the bookends.
Yeah. So on paper, it would suggest that I started formally teaching when I became a university professor, right? And now, looking at my full career as a healthcare provider prior to entering healthcare education, I realized that, from the time I got my master's until like the 10 years that I was in healthcare, in fact, I was teaching. I was educating. Now, granted, it was in very short snippets, right? So I've got this injured athlete. I've got to, one, understand what their needs are, put together a training program to help them get better, explain that information to them, get them to buy in. And basically, buying in is engagement, right? So,
Amen.
getting them to buy in that this is the appropriate rehab for them, explaining things to their parents, explaining things to the doctors and the coaches. And so now when I sit back and I look at my career as a whole, I realize like I've actually kind of gone back to that, right? So it's the consulting, and I'm doing this teaching in smaller snippets that are really intense, which was similar to when I'm working in healthcare, when I was working in healthcare, which was teaching in small snippets. That's the bookend. And what happened in between all of that was 9 to 5, actually not even 9 to 5, really. Most times it was 7 days a week of creating a curriculum, teaching multiple courses, speaking at conferences, which is a different experience than being in a classroom. It's also a different experience to write a paper that's going to be published.
Yeah.
You're trying to impart information. And so, in the bookends it was into very intensive strategic snippets of the learning experience. And in between, it was a lot of the foundational information, like foundational knowledge and experience that I needed to really help me be where I am today.
Well, and I think it's really interesting, this idea that you're this scaling you're thinking about in learning and making in small snippets, because I think actually sometimes we think that those tiny little bursts are just like all these tiny little random bursts, but I bet if we think back, those small snippets are the ones that stick with us longest.
Absolutely.
They make, because they're meaningful to us in the moment, they are more likely to be like that thing we need right now. Like as someone who was a college athlete who was very injured at a certain point, like, and I'm in PT now for something, and the physical therapist was like, oh yeah, when you were in college, they misdiagnosed all this. Like they screwed you 20 years ago, which is why you're having what you're having now, which was a great conversation to be having. I was like, oh geez. She was like, here, read this book.
Right.
And yeah, that was great. But she, it's a really interesting thing when I learn things from them in those situations. It's the same kind of thing. So it's like, okay, I have this problem right now. You person have the solution. And in the next 5 minutes, you can explain to me not only what's happening, but what I need to change. And we can build a plan to experiment with it. And that's coaching, that's teaching, that's consulting, that's all of those things. Call it whatever the heck you want. But those are the things that, when we reflect on them, really make the biggest changes. It doesn't need to be 15 weeks, 4 hours a day in this course. Like there are these structures built into education that is a whole separate conversation that are not serving anyone.
Right.
That's a whole another can of worms for another LinkedIn Live. Structural inadequacies in education with Carrie and Sarah. But I think that it's so interesting to think about the impact of the smaller bites over time and of getting exactly what you need when you need it.
Right. Sarah, listening to you say that, it really reflects, some of the theory around adult learning. And there's this book called When We Decide, or If We Decide, or How We Decide, I think it is. But in it talks a lot about how, for adults in particular, our learning it's oftentimes attached to a strong emotion, right? So there's that. But then, some of the assumptions about, and these are validated assumptions about adult learners, is that one, we all are problem solvers, right? Like we seek out a learning experience because we have a problem we're trying to solve. Yeah. And, when we think about adults in their social roles, all of us right now are I don't want to say struggling, but all of us are navigating time management in a different way that we hadn't before. So you take all three of those together, in fact, yes, what we are seeking, it needs to be very focused to address whatever the problem is that we're having. It needs to help us get clarity and give us an answer in that moment, and then we're done, right? And then we go off, we apply it, we massage it, right? So we flip it on its head, put it on its side, use it in different ways. And then when we're ready, we come back and say, okay,
Mhm.
I did all those things, I get it, but here's the deeper question that I have.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things, and because I so strongly believe in that type of learning experience for adults, that's the approach that I take when I work with my clients. Is, they think, oh, we're just going to jump right in and start creating a course or revising my course, and I'm like, no, let's talk about who you're talking to first off. I said, and let's go beyond who your ideal client is, because, and I liken it to inviting people to a dinner party,
Mhm.
right? So you invite your ideal clients to your dinner party because they're the types of people that you want to talk to. But now that you all are sitting around the table and you want to have a conversation about how to fold a napkin, one person may have never experienced a cloth napkin in their life. Another person might be 5 generations of napkin manufacturing. And another person might, be the descendants, I don't know, of like renowned napkin folders. So, how do you have a conversation now that you've got these three people at your table who are basically similar and who you want to talk to? You have to acknowledge the barriers that they may have to contribute to this conversation. And so that's, again, going to those small snippets, that's the small snippet conversation that I encourage people to have first, because then it will inform how we build.
Well, and it's that, like, as a teacher, as somebody that's been in a classroom or worked with
Mhm.
other humans, what you know is two humans can come at you with the same demographics
Yep.
and entirely different experiences.
Yep.
And you have to, in entirely different learning styles. And I know
Yep.
learning styles is this whole overview, like whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's over
But
there.
but like it's the person that's never seen a cloth napkin, the person that's manufactured them for generations, the person I thought of at your table was someone who's an origami artist
Yes.
who
There we
comes from
go.
an artistic origami family and is like, oh, well, I can do the same thing with napkins. I have this other skill set that I can bring with me.
Right.
And
Right.
you just don't know what
Hmm.
they've brought. And so it's really interesting. I do similar work with clients when we're talking about how to express your value to the people you're trying to bring in, to the people you're trying to sell to, how to share what you're doing, why it matters to them, what problem you're solving, all of that. But it's more about, like, I don't care what color socks she wears. I just don't. I don't care what color her hair is. I don't care what she, like, there are all these exercises, like, what does she eat for breakfast? I don't
Right.
give a crap. But it really, like, if you think of experiences,
Hmm.
characteristics, like,
Hmm.
for me, so many of the people that come my way are inexperienced in the business world, but deeply experienced in teaching.
Gotcha.
And like, that's a useful demographic for me. I don't actually care what they taught. I don't care what
Right.
grade. I don't care. But if I was like, oh, I only work with 11th grade English teachers, what? It doesn't make any sense to like green and drink tea on Tuesdays. Like, it makes me insane. You can tell. But so that totally makes sense. And I think that that's really, yes, agreed. I'm going to change us directionally slightly.
Yeah.
Um, Talk to me as someone who thinks in education and lives in business.
Yep.
Tell me what your favorite part of business is and what your biggest challenge has been.
Oh my goodness. Like I just had a flood of thoughts. Just a flood of thoughts. Oh my gosh.
Start with one. It's okay.
How do I even tease it out? I would say because okay, here's something that it's I'm actually gonna say it's personal, but it really it's pivotal. So for me, the best part of business is that I am the final voice. I'm the original voice and I'm the final voice. And what I mean by that is because my entire career has been in athletics, as a healthcare provider, where it's about judgment, right? Is that the right judgment call? Is that the right, treatment, blah, 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 to being in higher education where it's around did this, really the course assessments are about did the kids like you as opposed to did they actually learn anything, right? So there's that level of judgment. And then there's like the publishing and research level of judgment. And so there are constantly these hoops that I've had to jump through that I didn't get to define what those hoops were. But now as a business owner, I have the ability to define what the standard is. I have the ability to decide what direction I'm going to take and when. And so for me, that has been one of the most liberating parts of being in business for myself. It's really given me a sense of confidence that I even getting my PhD, walking across the stage, getting my first published article and book chapters, it doesn't compare to the feeling and the experience of being the original voice and the final voice. It's just amazing.
It's interesting. So many people that I talk to point to that as both the biggest joy and the scariest thing. There are so many ways in which people are sort of afraid of the power of that.
Yeah.
Of being sort of the end all be all decider. Like it's that it all rests in me kind of attitude. Like I have to do this right. And with teachers, it's like, well, but I have to do it right.
Right.
But it is, but I think your approach to it is really lovely in that it's like, look, if I want to jump through a hoop, I'll go decide what color hula hoop I want to buy.
Yeah.
If I'm going to jump through a hoop, I'll make the freaking hoop. But I did it to myself. I bought the freaking hula hoop. And like, I get to decide how hard or easy I make this process is super empowering. It's a super powerful position to be out in the universe with. And it's also that like, it's the taking on of the responsibility, but not in a way that is like it's putting the pressure cooker on it. Right.
It's not stifling in any capacity. And, I have found, I've always, as a kid, I was incredibly shy, but I had a sense of adventure, right? I've always wanted to travel the world, and it was really around adventure. I wanted to learn about other lands, other cultures. And so even now as a business owner, when things are challenging, yes, there are some days that I'm like, you know what, I'm getting in the bed. Like I'm pulling the covers back over my head and I'll just start over tomorrow. I'm not saying that I don't have those days.
Amen.
But I look at it as this is interesting. What can I learn in this? What did, at the end of the day, I think, well, what did I learn? Why did this happen? Right. So I'm always asking, I'm always being inquisitive, and that's the learner in me. And it has served me well. So thank you for that question. But I would say one of the things in business that have been, I'm going to say challenging, is the technology for one. Okay, I'm just going to get on a soapbox just for like 10 seconds. I can't stand the technology. I cannot stand it. I can't stand it. I can't stand it.
Well, but like in
And
what way? Define us
it's,
technology.
it's all of it, right? So because you have a greater reach with social media. And so, and I've learned to embrace that for what it is. But even with that, like, well, why is one thing working and something else not working? And my IT person says, well, Carrie, it's because there's an algorithm. Well, I don't understand. How do you know? Like, and so there's like that level of technology. There's the level of technology. I'm just going to out us, Sarah, right? Like at the beginning when we were trying to log in, right? Like I'm pushing the button, but she's not hearing me. I'm not hearing her, right? So it spans everything for me. It spans everything, and it's not a crippling, right? Like it doesn't ruin my everyday, but I'm just like, another annoying, like here's that
It's like death by
technology.
a thousand cuts, kind of.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. But anyway, that's just sort of my soapbox that I gladly share with people. But other than that, I would say another challenge for me has been really understanding the language, right? Like the 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 language of business. And not that it's a hard reach, but right when I think I got it and I think what's happening is my business takes a step forward. And when it takes a step forward, the level of language deepens. And so it's like, okay, now I know the basics, and now I have to learn this level of business language. And so that's, again, it's like, oh, okay, well, I learned something new. I didn't.
Yeah, I think the language thing actually intimidates a lot of people because it's like, okay, I open up this online business building book and it's like lead funnel, magnet, sales page, website, SEO, letters in a row, like, and you know what, like I can come back at you with like curriculum and assessment and formative and summative and let me throw some terms at you.
Right.
But it's a matter of like making the parallels between terms, because it doesn't come with like a handy pocket guide for what you spoke as a teacher that you now speak in business. I have a client who actually brings me words every week. She's like, what does this mean for me? And we talk about that all the time. But the other thing that I think is really interesting in there is I have this friend who is a coach who has this wonderful picture for what you just said. She said, every time we encounter something in our business, we're like on a spiral staircase. And what we do as our business grows is we have like, take your terms, like lead magnets and lead generation and sales are all like standing on the outside of the staircase looking at you, but they go all the way up. So what happens as your business grows is you continue to re-encounter them from a higher and higher point. And every time you meet them again, they like poke you, and you have to you learn a new thing about them just from a different place. And our brains are always like, well, but I'm here again. Yeah. But we forget that we navigated like another layer of the staircase up.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's so true. It is so, so true. Because a year ago, I was like, oh, I hate technology. I just don't even want to open a laptop. And now, like later today, I have a very expansive, intensive, deep question to ask my IT person that there's no way in the world a year ago I would have even had the words to be able to articulate what I need help with.
Yeah. And so are you still fighting technology in some ways? Absolutely. But are you just doing it from a higher point in the staircase? Yes. Absolutely. And at a certain point in the staircase, like you meet some guy that's like, here, technology guy, handle this part of the staircase. This is now for you. And but like, there's somebody else that's their joy. So the joy of growing a business is like eventually being to the point where like, you could be like, hey, person who loves this more than me, here you go. I will happily pay you for this service. Thank you for playing.
Yeah. And that's it. It's finding. So I don't know what your experience has been, but in higher ed, a lot of the work is in isolation. right? It's a very independent experience that people have. And so I entered being a business owner with that same mentality, is that I have to do this by myself. And
Mm.
the reality is it's really, I want to use positive language. It's an invitation for you to invite others into your space, as opposed to saying, oh, I don't want to ask for help, or I should be, I was so successful before, I should be able to figure this out on my own. But rather use the language of, hey, this is not my area, this is not my strength. And this is the language I use with my IT person, is this is not my strength. Clearly you backstroke in it. Do you want to, you want to join my journey? And I've done the same for her, as, I'll join your journey in helping people understand your language.
Well, and I think of it all the time. So, in the exercise world, they talk about, what you get to do versus what you have to do.
Yeah.
In a business context, what I get to do is ask for help.
Yep.
I don't have to,
Yep.
but I get to. And like, there is a blessing in that, because I get to practice asking for help. Getting help it's not a deficit model. Like, it's
Yeah.
not I'm coming to you because I messed this up. It's, I get to ask for help because, as you said earlier, I am the decider. And
Right.
I get to look around and go like, crap, you know what? I'm really in my own way on this, or crap, I could do this, but it is going to take me the rest of my life. And I know someone who lives up the street, like my friend who is a graphic designer, who will look at it and 20 minutes later, it will be gorgeous. And I would have been here for 3 days.
Right.
And she does stuff with it that wouldn't even in 100 years occur to me,
Mm-hmm.
honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get to ask her for help. Like, I get to ask those
Yeah.
things. I don't have to. It's a gift that I get to give
Right.
myself on the regular.
Right.
And that's lovely.
Right. And it also actually goes back to adults being self-directed, right? So yes, we all get to ask for help, but we all get to decide who to ask.
Yes.
We all get to decide when we're over it and we're ready to ask, right? So even in the getting to ask, there's still validation, and there's still honor and the ability to do it on your terms.
Well, and it's different than it would be in higher ed or in a school system, in a college setting, because so often I think what we have found, and why we've learned to do this way, is we know the person that we got to ask in that situation is not someone who was going to give us what we needed. So like, you could ask, but you'll regret it.
Absolutely.
And so like, it's that now I not only get to ask, but I get to find the person that actually I want to ask.
Yep.
That gets me. And actually, it's funny, my husband jokes that whenever I hire somebody, contractor, web developer, anything, I really truly, more than anything, I care that like we are human together, that you get me and I get you.
Yep.
And then I worry about if you can do your job. Because if I don't want to hang out with you and have a conversation, like, I don't want to do this. And I don't hire people like that. I just, I can't bring myself to do it anymore. Where if I have to, like, I have a neighbor who is a contractor in the house right now working on a bathroom, who keeps going like, oh, does your husband have the checkbook? And she like is ready to punch him in the face. And I'm just, I can't, I don't know if I'm old or cranky or what, but I don't have the patience. And so for me, like, I get to hire people I enjoy.
Yep.
And that's the base of my business. Like, yay.
It is. I mean, you think about all the meetings you've ever had to sit in your career, and you're like, I would rather watch paint dry. But that's not what this is like. You just get to decide. You have so much ownership that it's freeing, right?
Yes.
The ownership is actually frees you. It frees your mind. It frees your creativity. It frees your calendar. Truly.
Well, and it's that, like, do you want to do this today? No? Great. Don't.
Right.
Like, I had a client last week who was like, I don't feel like this is working right now. And I was like, okay, put it down. And she was like,
Yeah.
what? Like it was like, I broke her brain for a minute. I was like, cool, let's not do that right now.
Yeah.
Because it's not working for you. There's no point in spinning on this right now. It's just not working for you. That's okay. You're mad at it. It's mad at you. Let's go do something else that is working.
Absolutely.
She was like, oh, she had
Right.
a hot moment of a mini stroke, I think. So tell me, there are plenty of people that listen to this that are sort of in the toe dipping phase of like, I am halfway out the door. One foot is in the water, and I'm deciding whether or not I should be in up to my waist in this whole business thing. What is the one thing you want them to hear? Because we're all always able to hear those things, but like what's something you would share with them that you have found that you think would be useful?
I would say that my experience has been, it's a journey. It's a journey. And I remember when I was thinking about getting my PhD, a colleague said, oh, he goes, oh, it's like a marathon. He's a marathoner. I hate running. I just hardly like to walk fast, let alone running. And so I would not say it's a marathon because there is no end to it. It's a journey. And the journey is what you make of it. There will be some bumps in the road. There will be some detour signs, and you have to decide which way to go. There will be some pauses in the journey, and there'll be some times when you get to put your foot on the gas and go as fast as you want. But when you look at it as, this is simply a journey, it is just a chapter in my life, as opposed to, this is defining my life. This is who I am. There is a destination. I think when you start to think about, use that ladder language, is really when it gets, you become fearful. You start experiencing a lot of doubt. You're inclined to say, I'll just stay in this job because it's stable and secure, or I'll find one similar to it because it's what I know. But those times when things are challenging for me, when I just go back to, Carrie, this is just a journey. It's just a journey. It's just a chapter for right now. It might be a 10-chapter book. It might be a 1-chapter book. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. It's, what is today going to look like?
Well, and it is that, like, listen, it's going to end up where it ends up.
Yeah.
It's going to look how it looks. It's going to be what it is. And you know what? I'm going to make it as fun and ridiculous and me as humanly possible. And it's my freaking journey, and I'll take what I want. If I want to take my stupid hat with me, I will. It is going to go forwards. And sometimes you're going to look around and go like, oh, how did I get over here?
Yeah.
And there are days where you're like, this journey is stupid. I don't know what I was thinking. And like all of that, the thing that goes terribly wrong for people, I think, is that they have those days and they're like, oh crap, I messed it up. No, man, you didn't. This is like on the journey, you're driving to vacation and something explodes, like, yep. And you look around, go ahead.
And that's the thing, Sarah, is it's my journey. Your journey is your journey. And I honestly, I would say the one thing that has really gotten in my way, and I allowed it, right? So like, I'm going to take ownership. I allowed it, is all of the messaging on social media, right? It has to be like this. You have to do it this way. It needs to be. And when you don't know anything, right? Which I didn't, you are like, oh, these people have been in business. They must know what they're talking about. And so you become a consumer of so much information that it is not helpful. And so I would warn people, right? I want to warn your audience with love to really get a handle on the online messaging, right? Take what you need, and then you have to recognize this has now become a distraction.
Well, and it's that clients make fun of me because they'll go like, oh, have you heard, so-and-so that I follow? And I just don't.
Yeah.
I am ruthless about the amount of noise I let in.
Yeah.
And that's something I teach people, because I think what happens, particularly teachers, are like researchers.
Yeah.
We like to find all the answers and read all the books and look at all the things and take all the courses. And we're like, woo, let's find the 16 ways. But you get done and you have 160 ways and you're like, crap, only needed one. Oh my gosh, now I'm going to pick the wrong one. And we just made a way bigger problem. So we could just tune out 96% of that.
Yep.
And just trust yourself. That's the other part of this.
Yes.
I don't need all the noise. I know that I'm going to figure it out. You are going to figure it out.
Yep.
And will I do it the hard way? Pretty likely. But so freaking what?
Yeah. And there's a lesson in that. You'll be better for, yes. We've all gone through the 2-day exercise when it really should have only taken 20 minutes. But now we know.
Yep.
Now we know that's a rabbit hole. Don't even look at it.
Well, and the next time you're like, oh,
no. It's a trap. It's a trap.
It's a trap. I see it. I saw you, bunny. I see you coming to get me.
Right.
This is so much fun. We could talk all day. We cannot though, actually, because you have things, I have things. So tell me how to have people find you, and tell me what you have coming up soon, because I know there are things.
Yes. Thank you so much for the invitation. People can find me. LinkedIn is mainly where I hang out, but my website is www.learningandsolutions.com. And I actually have a 5-day challenge coming up next week, and it's called Fix to Finish. And basically I'm here to help people find that small fix to actually finish their curriculum. And it really is a small fix. And so it's 1 hour for 5 days. We'll meet at virtually 11 a.m. to noon Eastern time. Yep, Eastern time. And I'll go through some very strategic parts of efficiently and effectively revising and constructing a curriculum.
Instead of working on it for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
That's
right,
insane.
Even though it's a million degrees outside everywhere in the country, there are other things that we all could be doing, and it just causes so much stress. And so I've figured it out. I figured it out for me. Yeah. And my goal is to share my insights with others, because I think that they will be helpful.
Woohoo! Yes. So I will link all of Carrie's things in the transcript and the notes. We will have all that here for you. If you go click on the podcast information, you can grab it all. If you are really trying to teach people and you're thinking that you look at what you're building and you're like, I don't know if anybody will get through this. Yeah. If you're thinking that, you do. And we have all thought it, where you're like, ooh, this is so boring. I don't know what to do though. I don't know how to do it different. Right. Listen, turn around, go to Carrie's website. Please call her, because she can help you fix this. It doesn't have to be painful for you or them. Holy moly.
It doesn't. And my focus is on calm. So we're going to get through it without the extra stress, without aggravation. It'll be a peaceful experience.
That's crazy. Yay, peaceful, because that's it. That's the whole thing, right? It doesn't all need to be this hard. Any of it, none of it, anything. Absolutely. And from a business perspective, if you are a teacher in the business world and you are halfway in and you're like, oh, in my own way, don't know what all these words mean, really trying to, trust yourself and own your spot. This is what I do with people in coaching. This is my world, and I'm happy to help. Worst case, we have a conversation and you feel better about it and you go on your merry way, all good. Yeah. So with that, Thank you, Carrie, so much for
you.
this and for being here with me today. And I will see you all on the next episode of the podcast.